All of this had a profound negative impact on my daughter. And yes, if I'm honest, I'm still upset that she and I had to experience this level of pain and dysfunction because it didn't have to be this way. And since we're being honest here, as we always are, I did not always handle things well. Every parent will most likely blunder a bit when faced with these emotionally charged situations and when their kids are being hurt.
Welcome to the Blended Family Breakthrough Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike and Kim.
We believe in a world where blended families can experience a future full of hope, connection, and peace.
That's why we offer tools, strategies, and guidance that move you from a place of confusion and conflict to experiencing a life of confidence and connection.
We're so glad you're joining us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations as we cover everything from romance to parenting and yes, even dealing with that difficult ex.
So if you're ready to experience breakthrough in your blended family, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hey there, thanks for joining us today. We just want to commend you for the investment that you're making into your family each time you put your energy into learning new strategies and implementing them in your home. We are really grateful to be trusted by you and to partner with you through the show as you make some imperfect progress, just like we've done over the years. You know, we recently heard from a listener who left a review over on Apple Podcasts. And they shared that Blended Family Breakthrough offers them some amazing practical tools that have been so helpful. Hey, thanks for that feedback.
Yes.
You know, we work really hard to ensure that what we share is practical and actionable. And if you haven't had a chance to share your feedback through a rating or a review, why not just do that right now? We would love to hear from you. And thanks in advance for doing that. And by the way, don't forget about social media. Head over to Instagram, head over to Facebook, and make sure you're following us because you don't want to miss anything.
And sharing us.
Yes, we would love that. All right, honey, how about we get started with today's episode?
Absolutely. You know, kids of divorce who've moved back and forth between two homes, they all tend to want something very simple. They just want to be connected to the people they love, just like we do.
Right.
They want the freedom to enjoy each of their parents without any strings attached. What they don't want is ongoing emotional tension and stress as they navigate these dynamics. And the reality is, kids just aren't equipped to handle the emotional turmoil that can emerge in those tension moments.
Yeah.
The heart of the matter here is very clear. As kids move between their two homes, they want to be able to relax and enjoy each parent, each family unit. It's that simple. But for many kids, they're unable to do that because of unhealthy co-parenting practices and patterns.
Yeah. You know, if you've listened to the show for any length of time, you might have heard us share before that the research clearly confirms children successfully adjust to the ending of their parents' marriage and can fare reasonably well if the following circumstances exist. Number one, parents are able to bring their marital relationship to a close without excessive conflict. Number two, children are not put into the middle of whatever conflict does still exist.
Right.
And number three, there's a commitment from both parents to cooperate on issues of the children's material, physical, spiritual, educational, and emotional welfare. You know, it's these three things that kids need most from their divorced parents. The absence of excessive conflict, not being put in the middle, the mutual commitment to cooperate on their behalf, that's what they really need. And it's what they need in order for them to manage those back and forth dynamics well and to truly thrive. The research goes on to say that high conflict stepfamilies and conflict between their parents can have negative effects on children and can be contributing factors in their overall adjustment and development. They're less likely to complete high school and more likely to have lower educational achievement and leave home earlier. The bottom line is that children need their parents to work together, whether they're married, whether they're divorced, or if they're remarried in a blended family.
Absolutely. So to help you increase your cooperation and lower the stress and tension for your kids, we'd like to share 8 tips that can help you steer clear of unhealthy co-parenting patterns, which tend to be pretty easy to fall into for most co-parents. I know I've been there.
Yeah.
And we're betting you really do want to stay focused on those 3 things that Mike just mentioned so that your kids can thrive as they move between their 2 homes. You can certainly do your part to protect them from stress and tension and set them up for the best possible outcomes simply by adhering to these 8 tips.
Sure.
Which all the experts agree are best practices for co-parenting relationships. So regardless of the attitudes and the actions of your ex-spouse, it's up to you to do what you can to reduce conflict, keep your kids out of the middle, and commit to cooperate as much as possible on issues of your children's well-being.
For sure.
So, honey, what do you say we go ahead and dive into that first tip?
I think that'd be great. You know, the first tip, now hear us out, okay? The first tip is that we're going to honor and protect the kids' time in the other home, okay?
Yeah.
You know, divorced parents really shouldn't make plans for their children during the other parent's scheduled time without express permission and only when it's absolutely necessary. That means you've got to work with your ex on these kinds of things. Parents need to refrain from telling kids about an activity before permission has actually been granted by the other parent.
Yeah.
You know, saying something like, hey, there's a concert in the city next week. I know it's your week to be at your mom's, but do you want to try and go? Right? That essentially puts the child in the middle. It forces them internally to have to choose between each of their parents' preferred agenda. You know, that's a position that we just don't want our kids to have to navigate.
No.
It also makes the other parent the bad guy if they need to refuse the scheduling change and can set the child up for disappointment, right? What you really want to do is commit to working out the details directly with your ex prior to communicating any plans with the kids. Scheduling issues are adult issues, right? And as you're doing all that, you want to do your best to support your child's time in their other home by eliminating excessive or unnecessary communication with your kids.
Right.
You know, you might really want to be loving. You want to have this connection point even when they're away from you, but often it can be received as more of an intrusion. It's best for kids to be able to fully settle into each home during visitation and be able to relax without being pulled back and forth emotionally. And for a lot of kids, that continual or unplanned communication can stir up tough emotions. Yeah. It can be tension filled when they're talking to one parent in another parent's home, especially if you happen to be particularly emotional with them and you're expressing how sad you are or how much you're missing them in that moment.
Yeah,
many
tough.
kids are going to experience some guilt and they're going to actually feel responsible for your emotions.
Yeah.
But they're stuck because they're supposed to be in the other parent's home at that time.
And they should be able to enjoy that.
Exactly. So unless a child has actually requested specifically to have some of that cross communication and your ex and you have been able to work that out and the child and you and the ex are all able to emotionally handle that, you really want to do your best to reduce this as much as possible. And what that's going to do is it's going to free the kids up to actually compartmentalize their life a little bit and then fully engage in each home, which is often an effective coping skill for the kids in these dynamics. Right. So it might feel counterintuitive, but part of your job is to actually honor and protect their time in that other home. Okay? So that's the first tip. Honey, what's the next tip? That's right.
The next tip is to keep your communication with your ex-spouse direct, calm, and brief. Short texts and brief emails can help even conflicted co-parents pass information, confer with scheduling, and monitor children's activities while maintaining some emotional distance. Now, if both parents are comfortable going digital, online calendars and apps can facilitate some peaceful communication and help you to cooperate well. Stick to business-like, fact-based information that's focused on the well-being of your kids. And if you notice a point where communication seems to be headed in the wrong direction, maybe it's becoming emotionally charged or really unproductive, instead of engaging, choose to respectfully end the conversation. You can keep your communication from escalating by simply giving yourself and your ex a little cool down time.
Yeah.
My preferred strategy for ending an unproductive conversation is to calmly say, I guess we'll need to agree to disagree for now. And then follow up later to discuss any pertinent unresolved issues that are related to the kids.
Yeah.
And if you need a great tool that can help with communication, organization, and scheduling, you might want to check out episode 153, where we interview the founders of the Family Core. They've got a powerful practical tool that can really help, and we'll put a link in the show notes so you can check that out.
For sure.
What's the next tip, honey?
Well, the next tip is to remember that children should never be asked to pass messages or keep secrets between parents. All right, here's a really simple, unintentional example. Hey, could you text your mom and let her know that we're running a little late? Isn't that simple little thing something that's so easy to do without even realizing that we're unintentionally putting the kids in the middle?
Seems innocent.
It does. But being put in the messenger position for a child, it causes undue stress. And it puts them in the middle of communication that really should be expressly between the adults. And if your ex happens to be frustrated that you're running late or they're just having a bad day that day, they might be tempted to react with some sort of negative comment about you to the child. And now they're in the middle of that frustration. They might be taking their frustration out on the child. It's just not worth the risk. And really, it's just not the job of the child to be the middleman in your co-parenting relationship. I don't mean that harshly, but it's true. We've all got to face that reality. I know it might seem convenient and it might make things easier to kind of utilize the child as the go-between sometimes. And some kids might seem like they're capable of handling that kind of job, but it simply isn't fair to ask kids to manage these dynamics between their parents. Parents need to be the parents and allow their kids to just be kids. Children should also never really be questioned about the happenings in the other household or asked to spy and report back. You know, hey, your mom's new car sure looks expensive. Do you know how much she paid for that? Or something like, so where's your dad been taking his new girlfriend out on their dates, right? Even little things can put the kids in an uncomfortable position and create tensions around loyalty.
Right.
If the child brings up information about the other home on their own, right? You haven't asked them about it. Keep in mind that your job is to simply listen from an objective viewpoint without probing, right? You don't have to ask a bunch of follow-up questions. Really? Let me ask you some questions about that.
Just listen.
You know, another simple aspect of this is we don't want to expect our kids to keep secrets from home to home, right? And so as they're put in these positions that I'm talking about right now, it's a burden that kids just don't need to carry. And ultimately it pulls on their loyalties between their parents. This can also lead to conflict if the child happens to tell the other parent what was shared, right? Oh, yeah, dad told me about this. That could probably anger your ex, and that increases stress. It increases tension in your co-parenting relationship. And for your kids who are now stuck in the middle, that's just a conflict they don't need to deal with. So in a situation like that, your kids may end up feeling guilty about their involvement or feel like the conflict was their fault, right? So a lot of this we don't want the kids to experience, but unintentionally it just happens when we're not careful. So unless there is true suspicion of abuse or neglect, let's just allow for some privacy in that other home, just like you'd like your own privacy in your home. All right. What's next, honey?
The next one is to manage transitions wisely. You know, moving between households requires a lot of adjustments for children. And parental tension is troubling for kids during those vulnerable transition times. It's best for the kids if all the adults can remain calm and relaxed during that transition time. So that means that conversations about scheduling and other issues are best to be saved for another time when the kids just aren't around or even in earshot. If your ex shows up at the swap and initiates a conversation that falls outside these guidelines, just respectfully ask to schedule a time to have this discussion when the children aren't present. And if for some reason your ex isn't calm and relaxed when you show up, do your best to avoid conflict by regulating your own emotions so that you can stay calm and collected for the sake of your kids. Mm-hmm. You can't control your ex, but you can control yourself, regardless of how they choose to behave at that difficult time of transitions. Yeah.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
What's the next tip, honey?
Well, I'm guessing if you're listening, you've probably heard that old expression, kill them with kindness. Well, it might be difficult, but kindness toward the other home really does go a long way. And honestly, so does positive feedback and some appreciation.
Right.
Small and positive input provides a safeguarding cushion that'll help to minimize difficulties when they do inevitably rise.
Right.
To an ex-spouse, you might say something like, hey, thanks for the schedule change. I really appreciate it. Right? That's a simple thing to do. Or maybe to that step-parent in the other home, hey, those new cleats you got for Lucas are great. I appreciate you picking those up for him. Or even just a simple, hey, thanks for being really good to my kids, right? Maintaining a steady flow of positive feedback and letting the other household know that you actually notice and appreciate what their contribution is, that's a great way to keep peace between your two homes and help keep peace for your child.
Right.
And when your kids notice your positivity and your kindness efforts, it speaks volumes about your willingness to cooperate on their behalf and about your good character.
Absolutely.
Kids are always watching how you're interacting with their other parent, and you want to rise above it all and really give them a good example.
They see it all.
Yeah. Even when adults in the other home are unkind and unappreciative, you can still choose to kill them with kindness, which over time can make a positive impact on your co-parenting relationship. It's to your own advantage to cultivate allies in the other home as much as it's up to you and avoid making enemies, which in the end, it just benefits the kids, right?
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to do a few things, right? So far, let's just recap for a moment. We're going to honor and protect our kids' time in the other home. We're going to keep communication with the ex direct, calm, and brief.
Right.
We're going to avoid using the kids to pass information or make sure we're not asking them to keep secrets, right, from the other home. And we're going to focus on being kind to the adults in the other home.
Right.
So let's keep going. What's next, hon?
Next is that disciplinary decisions should not be made across households without express agreement. So think about this. How might you feel or react if you went to pick up your child and your ex said, hey, by the way, Johnny broke one of our house rules last night, and I told him he was grounded for a week. So I don't want him seeing any friends or going out and doing anything fun while he's at your house.
So I grounded him for his time at your house.
Exactly. Now, you probably wouldn't be excited about getting on board with this, especially if you already had some fun things planned for Johnny to do.
And maybe the house rule he broke isn't a rule in your house, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so this is probably going to kick off some conflict if you disagree with their decision.
Right.
Well, guess what? The opposite is also true. If you give your child a consequence while they're in your home, such as being grounded or losing a privilege, you cannot expect your ex to enforce this in their home. Now, if you discuss the circumstances with your ex in advance and they agree that your consequence should carry over into their home, that's great.
Sure.
But remember, you can only control the parental decisions in your home. If you're trying to control or dictate parenting decisions or how your ex operates their home, you're most likely wasting a lot of time and energy, and you could be damaging your co-parenting relationship.
That's right.
Now, if you and your ex are able to collaborate around things like screen time usage, eating habits, priorities, responsibilities, discipline, and so on, well, that's awesome. And it's also good for your kids. But if that's not the case and you simply can't get on the same page, it's time for you to relinquish control over the other home and invest your time and energy focusing on building solid values, character traits, and life skills in your home where you do have control.
That's right. Yeah. Great tip.
All right, honey, on to the next one.
All right. Here's the next tip. Be mindful of the kind of information that you're sharing with your kids. Mm-hmm. Kids just need basic information, not all the sordid details. Right. You know, they do need to know things like, hey guys, we can afford to go out for dinner about twice a month now. They don't need to know how often dad pays child support and whether you believe it's sufficient or not. Right? If your kids ask questions about the past and your relationship with their other parent, you want to be really wise in how you respond. Keep your answers basic, age appropriate, and you certainly want to resist the urge to make disparaging comments about your ex.
Absolutely. You know, my ex and I divorced when our daughter Annika was 2, and so she doesn't really remember us ever being together. And there was a point in time, I think she was 9 or 10, she came to me and she asked, you know, why aren't Daddy and you married anymore? She was just curious and wanted to know. Now, I could have really crossed the line at that point and shared all kinds of sordid details about all the horrible and hurtful things her dad did to me and unload the painful experiences I endured while I was married to him. And, you know, it might have made me feel really, really good to run off at the mouth and expose all of his failings and flaws.
Well, at least in the moment it might have, yeah.
But it would not have made my daughter feel good. And it would have been very difficult information for her to onboard. Mm-hmm. Sadly, when most kids hear negative things about a parent, they tend to internalize these negative traits for themselves since they're a product of that parent.
Right.
It can negatively impact their self-worth and esteem. If you've ever been tempted to divulge sensitive information to your kids, please keep this in mind. Children, even teenagers, don't possess the mental capacity or maturity to understand and onboard the complexities of adult relationships. Mm-hmm. Even the kids who seem really mature on the outside, they still have brain development and emotional growth to do.
That's right.
They simply aren't prepared to handle this amount of emotional burden. Mm. Now, had I chose to kind of run off at the mouth and share inappropriate information with my daughter, it would have been self-serving for my own benefit, certainly not for hers, because it would have caused confusion, pain, and disconnection in her parental relationships. And, you know, not just between she and her dad, but disconnection with me as well, because it always backfires.
That's right.
Luckily, I was able to hold my tongue. It was hard, but I did it. And I gave Annika a basic answer, which was that I just couldn't be married to someone I wasn't able to trust. Yeah. And she accepted that without any further discussion.
Right.
Here's a great rule of thumb on this one. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Man, I learned that from my Nana when I was like 4 years old. Yeah,
it's great advice. Or if you're unable to hold your tongue when your child asks a probing question, press pause. Mm-hmm. Let your child know that their question deserves an answer, and you'll need some time to think before you can give them that answer.
Yeah, that's a great strategy.
Then go and get some help or do some research around how to best approach this conversation before you re-engage with your child. Yeah. Be wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great illustration and great tip, honey. I got that. All right, we've got one more tip for you, and that is you want to be aware of parental allegiances and parentification. Yeah. This is really important. Now, maybe you genuinely aren't criticizing your ex or consciously saying or doing anything to disparage the other parent, but if you're honest with yourself, you could be leaning into patterns of confiding or oversharing things with your kids. Things that tend to make you feel justified or that might help mitigate your own painful emotions and frustrations with your ex. Let me explain how this can play out. Sometimes we can just feel justified when our kids tend to align with us or appear to love or favor us over our ex. That can feel really affirming and really good to a parent who's in their own pain because it helps to ease that pain. pain that could be left over from a difficult history with the ex, or even current pain points that we're experiencing on an ongoing basis, especially if that ex has done some hurtful things to us, or even some things that we believe hurt the kids.
Right.
When our kids align with us, it makes us feel better. If we're honest, sometimes even superior.
Right.
And sometimes we can send subtle messages to the kids that encourage them to align their loyalties with us by sharing our emotional struggles in inappropriate ways or through subtle jabs aimed at that other home. Mm-hmm. So let's just kind of think about a few subtle ways that we do that. You know, when we're focused on getting justice or gaining validation for ourselves as the better or more beloved parent, the message that leaks out onto the kids can be detrimental, and it puts them in a very difficult position. The crux of that message is something like this: your other parent has done me wrong, and I need you to hear my pain and empathize with me and care for me by taking my side. That's kind of that underlying message that we probably don't intend to have, but it sets the stage for what's called a parental allegiance.
Yeah, and notice all the me and my words in there.
Yeah.
This generally comes from a hurting parent who maybe hasn't yet taken responsibility for their own healing and instead is trying to find comfort in their connection with their child. It might be unintentional, but they're over relying on their child to do the heavy lifting of easing their painful reality.
Yeah.
This can also manifest when a parent is aware their kids are still hurt by the divorce. And so they attempt to convince the kids that it wasn't their fault. They're the victim, and therefore it's the other parent who's caused all this pain. They're the villain.
Yeah.
And this is a parent who's emotionally aligning themselves with their children's pain and commiserating with them, which creates an us against the other parent dynamic.
Yeah. When that kind of thing is happening, many kids are going to feel the need to rescue that parent from their emotional pain, kind of care for them, and in essence, become a confidant and comforter, which is a dysfunctional dynamic that's called parentification. And it ultimately has a negative outcome for kids. Yeah. When kids experience the stress of parental allegiance or parentification, rather than simply being able to just be a kid and enjoy a loving relationship with both of their parents, they're now stuck in a painful place of internal tension. They're focused on making their parent feel better about themselves and attempting to carry a burden that they really should never have to deal with. And honestly, they just, like Kim said earlier, they're just not equipped to carry that.
No.
Kids inherently love to please their parents and make them feel good. Now, I know it doesn't always feel that way, especially with some of those teenagers out there.
Yeah.
But the reality is at the core, they really do. But in these dynamics, instead of experiencing freedom in their childhood, kids who are dealing with parental allegiance or parentification, they're now faced with some really difficult realities. And they find themselves asking questions like, whose side am I on? Who deserves to be loved more? Who do I agree with, mom or dad? Who needs me more? Right? That can be a burden. Or they might even be asking, how can I make my parent feel better? Right? You know, these just aren't questions that any child should have to wrestle with. We don't want them to experience the tension of having to align with one parent or the other, or having this perception that they have to choose between mom or dad. But many kids feel like they must make some tough choices when they're stuck in a parental allegiance or feel like they're being parentified. Yeah.
And, you know, I don't think any parent intentionally sets out to burden their kids and impact their childhood with these unhealthy dynamics.
No.
But it happens all too often with parents who are struggling with their own emotional pain. Sometimes parents aren't aware of how they could subtly and unintentionally be putting their kids at risk. We know you wouldn't want your kids to experience a parental allegiance or parentification. So we ask you to mindfully consider a few questions and think about these issues before you dismiss this altogether. Ask yourself, am I making comments or sharing information with the kids that we both know they shouldn't share with their other parent? Do I make comments about the behavior or character of the other parent in front of my kids or within earshot of them, even just in some subtle ways?
Right.
Do I ever cross the line of communicating with my child as a confidant rather than simply allowing them to just be the kid?
Mm-hmm.
Do I share my emotional struggles or details of the divorce with my kids in ways that might be a burden to them? Am I more focused on freeing my children to love their other parent, or do I have a subtle agenda for them to align more with me?
Yeah. We want to encourage you to get really honest with yourself about your words, your attitudes, and how you process your emotions. Consider how all of this overlaps with everyday family life and what your kids might be experiencing. Mm-hmm. If you want to understand more about parental allegiances, parentification, or other important aspects of co-parenting that will set your children up for the best outcomes, you can check out some of the links that we put in the show notes for other episodes on this topic.
Yeah. All right. So you've stuck with us in this episode so far. Good for you.
Well done. That's right.
But maybe all that we've shared today has left you feeling frustrated, discouraged, or angry because you agree with us that kids need to be protected, but unfortunately their other parent, your ex, doesn't follow any of these tips, and they seem a bit clueless about how their behavior is impacting your kids.
Yeah.
Maybe they even refuse to acknowledge best practices for co-parenting and think they're justified in what they say and do around the kids. And if that's your situation, man, we're really sorry and we get it. This is tough. Throughout the last 7 years of co-parenting with my ex, he simply ignored all 8 of these tips.
Yeah.
He not only made plans during my visitation with Annika, but at one point, he unilaterally canceled my visitation altogether, which forced us into the family court system for 3 years.
Yeah.
He used force, coercion, and manipulation when communicating with me, and it was extremely difficult for me to stay calm and manage my emotions. He used Annika to relay toxic, hurtful messages to me, forced her to keep secrets, and used coercion control to get information out of her about our home. Sometimes he'd bully me during transitions right in front of our daughter.
Yeah.
Instead of showing me kindness and positive appreciation, he devalued, dismissed, and disregarded me. He made unilateral parenting decisions and expected me to follow suit, even if I disagreed. He shared inappropriate and inaccurate information with Annika and slandered me. Through counseling, we discovered that Annika was put in a position where if she wanted to be loved and accepted by her dad, she had to turn against me. He put her in a position where she knew that if she didn't align with him, she'd suffer the consequences. And his wife, Annika's stepmom, parentified her by using her as a sounding board and relied on her for emotional comfort while unhealthy adult issues were going on in their marriage. All of this had a profound negative impact on my daughter. And yes, if I'm honest, I'm still upset that she and I had to experience this level of pain and dysfunction because it didn't have to be this way. And since we're being honest here, as we always are, I did not always handle things well.
Yeah.
Every parent will most likely blunder a bit when faced with these emotionally charged situations and when their kids are being hurt.
Right.
And if you've ever felt devalued, dismissed, or disregarded by your ex, I encourage you to go back and listen to episodes 112 and 113. And that's going to help you learn some additional tools that can set you up to respond well in those circumstances. And of course, we'll put links in the show notes to make it easy for you to get there.
Yeah. I just want to commend you, honey. I think you did well along the way, even in your imperfection. And yeah, there's times where you're still angry about it, and I get it.
It's hard.
But yeah, I'm really proud of you. I just want to say. And again, we know how painful and powerless it can feel when this kind of thing is going on and you're unable to fully protect your kids. Yeah. And if that's where you're at, you might be feeling defeated or even hopeless. Sometimes we hear a parent in this situation saying things like, well, if they're not going to fight fair, then why should I? I'm trying to do the right thing, but I keep getting thrown under the bus and it's just not fair. And you're right, it's not fair. But in the attempt to get justice for themselves, these parents are tempted to retaliate, to ignore these 8 tips and play that tit for tat game.
Yeah, they want to start throwing their ex under the bus.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that just makes things harder for the kids.
Yeah.
You might think you're winning when you're fighting back using those same weapons that your ex is using against you, but it's your kids who end up losing in the end. And ultimately, fighting that way is focused just on the here and now. And your job is to focus on the long-term outcomes for your child. And all the research shows that it's the level of peace between the homes that predicts the best long-term outcomes for kids.
Yeah. Here's the bottom line. If you want to protect your kids from experiencing these unhealthy dynamics and reduce the stress and tension they experience as they move between homes, then you've got to be willing to do your part, regardless of how the other parent behaves. You can't control or change your ex, but you can make necessary changes in how you show up, and you can control your own patterns of behavior. As we've learned over the years, you might not be able to eliminate stress and tension for your kids, but you can reduce it by vehemently adhering to these 8 tips. We know it's not easy. We've been there. And if you need some support, some validation, or help strategizing how to manage the dynamics in your co-parenting relationship, please reach out and schedule a free coaching call with us. We've been there and we're here for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, by the way, if you're a step parent, I just want to talk to you for a moment. All of this applies to you as well. You have a choice. You can be a detriment to your spouse's co-parenting relationship, which is going to negatively impact your stepkids and honestly, your relationship with them. Or you can choose to be a catalyst for cooperation and healthy dynamics between the homes. If you're inserting yourself in the middle of this and you're stirring some of this up, even unintentionally, it's not going to serve you well.
And we've seen many a step relationship, very badly damaged when kids overhear negative comments made about their other parent.
Absolutely. So you want to choose to make a positive difference for everyone by also following these 8 tips.
You can do it.
Yeah.
So let's all stay focused on honoring and protecting the kids' time in the other home by keeping your communication with your ex-spouse direct, calm, and brief. You want to avoid asking your kids to pass messages or keep secrets between you and your ex. Manage those transition times wisely. Kill them with kindness. You can do it. Don't make any disciplinary decisions across households without getting agreement from your ex. Be mindful when sharing information with your kids. And beware of parental allegiances and parentification. Parents and step-parents who successfully stick to these 8 co-parenting practices are doing their part to reduce stress and tension, and they're creating freedom and peace for their kids as they move between homes, which every child needs and deserves.
Absolutely. Hey, we hope that these 8 tips have been really helpful and practical and actionable for you today. And like Kim said a moment ago, if you need help implementing, don't hesitate to reach out to us for a free coaching call. We would love to be able to connect and help you.
Absolutely.
And for today, we're going to make that episode a wrap.
Until next time.